Hamish,
Chris.
where have you been?
Oh, gee, that's an existential crisis that you've just sent me into immediately. Where have I been?
I mean, I only ask you because you've been singing to us this afternoon, and you're going to sing some more. And it feels like so long since I've heard you sing.
It has been. I seem to have this cycle of coming out of hibernation maybe once every 10 years. And it's not intentional. It just seems to have evolved as a pattern. I think there's a number of reasons for it. One is the rate of my productivity, which isn't particularly high. I think compared to a lot of songwriters, my output usually seems to be a reaction to life's moments, and it seems to be it requires an intensity of experience. I suppose they're like a photograph. They're my emotional response to events in life, and most of the time, so there's something quite cathartic and almost therapeutic about them. And it must just be that those moments don't come along with that intensity that inspire me to write that often.
But lately you have found some headspace to write songs?
I found headspace to write songs, and I found it's more about singing and the joy of singing and the joy of sharing my voice has been the arrival of my daughter Adeline. She's been the one. She can't speak yet. She can do a mean rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with me, but it was my love for music and wanting to share that with her. And it's interesting, even just thinking about it now, that it wasn't conscious. It's been unconscious, but it drove me to pick up the guitar and sing to her every day, and sing to her as she would go to sleep of a night. And that's a really interesting question, because I haven't actually thought about what drove me or find that passion for music, but I suppose the arrival of her.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's an instinctive thing to want to sing to your child or someone else's child, probably your own. Even if you can't sing, like me, you still sing to your children when they're little. So what came out when you first started singing to her, when you were maybe singing her to sleep or whatever you were doing? What came out of your mouth?
It was a desire to comfort, and if I'm truly honest about it, my singing to her probably reflected an insecurity in myself, and it was trying to find a way to connect with a new life, and it was trying to wade through the limitations of myself as a new parent and having no idea what to do, but having this thing that I could rely on, that I felt could provide comfort, and it was a way of connecting, because it's an expression of emotion. This has all of a sudden turned into therapy, but I'd actually never thought about it like that. But it really reflects that desire to connect, but I suppose not necessarily knowing what to do or believing in my own capacity to do that without a crutch.
Did you sing, when you started singing to her then, did you sing anything specific, or did you just make sounds, or did you sing words to her?
The first song that I sang to her was a song called Sunshine, which was a Cordrazine song. I sang that song to her, and it was an important song to me because when my grandmother died and after she had passed and I was sitting there with her holding her hand, I sang to her. And I sang to her for probably about half an hour.
You sang Sunshine to her?
Sang Sunshine to her as well. Because it's a happy song. For Ada, it was different. I suppose it was a connection of two very important and special people in my life. For Ada, it was different. It's a song that I wrote envisaging it could be played on Sesame Street. And I like when I was growing up, and I think of Sesame Street and seeing all of them sitting on the stairs to the apartment building, and the idea, steal a little ray of sunshine and hoping that it's going to be fine today. And it's a song that I never really knew the meaning of until probably after a couple of years after I'd recorded it. And I recorded it here with Nick. And I thought it was a pretty song at the time, but it's about love. And I think a lot of songs are about love, but it's actually about that idea of love being so central to all of our lives, and love as a meaning, not as love as a thing necessarily between two people, but it's the compassion of love, it's the caring of love, and
a thing that exists.
It's a thing that exists
if you can tap into it.
Yeah. Interesting
that you pulled that song out for two special people who you loved.
It was unconscious and instinctive. Actually, no, it wasn't unconscious. It was conscious. It was actually being able to share with Ada something that had been so special to me to share with my grandmother at that vulnerable moment. And at two different stages of life, a person who had just finished their journey and a person that was just beginning theirs. But it was the comfort of music, and I think it probably goes back to what I just said, which is it's the thing that I've got. It comes back to that thing that I'm comfortable that I can offer. Where do I find comfort? How can I offer people comfort? And it's through the sound.
I want to talk to you about that because it's an extraordinary voice that you've got. Anyone who's heard it, and Cordrazine were top 10, God damn it, so a few people have heard it. It's an extraordinary thing, but you weren't always sure of yourself, were you?
I don't think I'm still not sure of myself. I'm still anxious. I don't think music for me was a place of comfort. It was a companion, and it was a way of trying to actually understand emotions and share emotions when I wasn't equipped with the language to do that, whereas sound, you can scream. Sound is an amazing thing, even if it's not sung. It's an extraordinary thing that it expresses so much without a single word. So music was an avenue into the world. It was a way of trying to find and create a space within that. Cordrazine was a blessing and a curse. It was something that I wanted to do my whole life. So Nick, who we're in his place today and who I grew up doing music with, so we started playing music when we were young, and we found our musical voices together and evolved with each other. It was music was a way of developing friendships. It was about, and it's always been about relationships. But for me, I think it was trying to find confidence, identity. I think of all of the different explorations of self that music has led me through, and with every new record and every new passion came a new set of clothes and a new hairstyle, and it was about trying to find myself, voice, and actually understand myself. And Cordrazine, when it started to do okay, it took the pressure off me having to understand myself, because all of a sudden you become surrounded by groups of people who decide that they like who you are without actually really knowing who you are. And if you don't know yourself, then it can stop you evolving. But it also means that those aspects of yourself that you might be slightly uncomfortable with or a bit anxious about, you don't necessarily have to work on, because people just say, oh, you guys are really good. Oh, you're fantastic at what you do.
You could hide in there a little bit.
You can hide. So rather than having to become a competent person and integrate into the world around you and exist as a reasonable citizen, then a little world evolves around you. And that can be stilting and that can be a bit difficult. If I look around me, I think it's clearly something that musicians and artists in general struggle with. It's like if you consider the struggle of artists, we're usually pretty vulnerable people who are trying to find a voice in the world, and then all of a sudden you've got a spotlight on you because of the vulnerable, delicate art that you've created. And people ask questions that you're not necessarily ready to answer, or you haven't got the answers for, and can be a bit probing and confronting. And it's probably not surprising that artists are pretty chaotic people. For me, I would retreat. That was my thing. I'm an avoidant person. So I'd retreat from that space before I got found out.
Well, in fact, you retreated so much that the band ceased to be because you weren't convinced of your own. You didn't think you could follow through with it. Just as people were starting to respond to your voice, you stopped.
I did. I remember vividly the band was on tour in the US, and we'd just played South by Southwest, and we then travelled to New York, and I was in the Sony BMG building in Times Square, and I was looking out, and out the window was the Chrysler building, and that was the moment which it's like, well, are you going to follow through? Like, what do you do now? Because even just being there and looking at that view, it's asking you a question, it's like, well, where does the game go from here?
Yeah, what do you got?
What do you got? And for me, that was a question that was too hard. I felt that if I continued at that point in time, then I would be discovered as a fraud. And by quitting and by leaving, I disappointed a few people, and in particular the band who, Sam and Chris and Rowan, who had worked so hard. And that's the hard thing, because other people invest in your passion and vision. And so it was the passion and the vision that got these group of people together. And just as they've kind of got on board, and just as they've thrown their hopes and dreams, into this thing, and the person that kind of rounded everyone up just disappeared. So that's pretty tough. But for me, at that time, it was easier to deal with the disappointment of a few people than being exposed to the world as a fraud.
Even though you're not a fraud, and you were not going to be a fraud, it was just your perception of fraudulence that made you walk away.
It is. It's absolutely and utterly a lack of belief or faith in yourself. And that's probably that's a conversation for a reclined leather couch to say, well, where does that come from?
Well, we've had plenty of those over the years, Sunshine.
we have. But it's interesting because that doubt is the same doubt that produces the music. So as destructive as it can be and as limiting as it can be, it's also given me the greatest joys.
It's the spark, the sort of the X factor.
It's that fragile seeking of meaning. And if I think about why Cordrazine may have connected, and you never know why Cordrazine connected, I suppose it's being able to express and capture a vulnerability that's relatable to others. If I think about the music that inspired me and how I became this kind of this morphed thing of all of the people that influenced me, it was the power of their music and their expression. To be able to articulate what I felt but couldn't find words for or couldn't express myself.
And you're going to show us some of that this afternoon, which I'm pretty happy about. You're going to sing some songs that are important to you from back in the day.
I think so.
That helped you. I suppose, I don't know, get the confidence to do it yourself, to find a certain register.
I think as just as you find, just as every time you discover a new musical passion, and when you're growing up, there's lots of those, whether it's kind of becoming a punk because you like the fashion, and then you kind of discover the depth of the music associated with that, whether it was a new romantic, a goth, whether it was then kind of Manchester and all of the Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses. And during Cordrazine, if anyone chooses to have a look at all of the old press shots, which is slightly embarrassing now, I was a raver.
You were.
That was where I was immersed at that point in time. So you'll find pictures of me at shows at venues dressed in my rave pants with my trainers and my T-shirt.
Fat pants.
Ready to get off stage and go straight to a party somewhere, a dance party somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was, I suppose, that was an interesting place, but I suppose it was also a place of avoidance as well. So rather than kind of being immersed in the music scene that was related to the music that I was creating, there was just a really special place. But the songs that I thought that I would sing are probably places that my voice evolved from.
Yeah, I was thinking that. What's the first one you want to do?
Small Town Boy.
Hey.
By Bronski Beat.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Somerville's voice and singing in falsetto for a whole song I just found mind-blowing.
So this is a sort of I guess it was a chart-topping song, but I guess you'd call it a sort of like a coming out anthem from the, late 80s?
No, early 80s. So
Early 80s.
Very early 80s. And the bravery of the song at the time, at the climate that was released into, and I suppose you're talking about a time in Britain of the National Front and extreme homophobia. And it's the vulnerability of this song. It's there was cheeky gay anthems, and I don't know, I'm not the best person or most qualified to talk about gay anthems, but you had others like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and you had icons like Boy George and Pete Burns, but this was vulnerable.
Yeah, they were more celebratory.
They were.
Look at me, I'm out and proud. This was a sort of transitional thing
it was
a personal story.
And so, should I do it now?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, why not? Hopefully this goes okay. This is leaving home with everything he owned in a little black case, alone on the platform, the wind and the rain on the side, and no only face, lonely face. Mother would never understand why he had to leave, but the answers you seek will never be found at home. The love that he seeks will never be found at home. Run away, run away, run away. Run away, run away, run away. Pushed around and shoved around, he was a lonely boy. Oh, you're the one they talked about, rolling down as he pushed you down, and as hard as he could to hurt you and to make you cry. No, you wouldn't cry for them, just to your soul. No, you wouldn't cry for them, just to your soul. Run away, run away, run away. Run away, run away, run away. Cry, boy, cry. Cry, boy, cry, boy, cry. Cry, boy, cry, boy, cry. Cry, boy, cry, boy, cry. Leaving home with everything he owned in a little black case, alone on the platform, the wind and the rain on his side, on the holy face.
Wow.
It's tough. It's a tough song to sing.
It's a hell of a song.
I suspect that we may have been in the same place to see Jimmy Somerville sing at the Apollo Festival
Yeah.
many years ago.
Don't ask me too many questions, Hamish.
I do remember seeing him and just think he was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about that vulnerability, isn't it? And that line between being sure and being not sure that I think most people would recognise in your own singing voice as well. When did you realise that you had this gift with your voice?
Oh, I don't. Probably only recently. I struggle to listen to anything that I did earlier because it captures a vulnerability. There's an honesty about it that I find really disconcerting. If I go back to my early explorations of voice, I suppose like everyone, it's like you're a mimic. And so you mimic as best you can the people that inspire you. And I've tried to mimic everyone from, Nick Cave to Mudhoney to Liz Fraser from the Cocteau Twins to Morrissey, until at some point in time they become internalised. All of those voices, all of those, they become internalised and your voice becomes your own, but it's not a conscious point of arrival.
No, but I mean, did someone teach you, or did you sing in choirs or anything?
No, I sang. The place where I felt most comfortable singing, I'm an only child, and so music, I think, was a friend and it was a companion. And I would often just sing to myself for company, sing to myself to alleviate loneliness. And so maybe my songs are so maudlin because that was the role that music played for me, which was a friend. And I think that continued, that essentially I sought music as a way to explain every emotion.
That's interesting. So when did you figure out, though, that you could do it really well and it was affecting other people? Positively, like people were responding.
I probably only think recently.
Like what? Yesterday or last week?
The way that the best way to describe it is when people will say to you, "You're looking good today." You don't realise that at the time, but after a few people give you that feedback, you kind of go, "Oh, yeah. Okay."
Yeah.
But you also need to be ready and willing and able to actually receive that feedback. So,
gotcha.
When Cordrazine was probably at its peak, like doing the top 10 thing and playing to sold-out venues, you could have had the whole world telling me that I was good and I had a lovely voice, and I would smile politely and say thank you. But I wasn't capable of receiving that. If I had have been, I probably would have continued doing it rather than running away feeling as though I was a fraud. So my appreciation of being able to sing and enjoying singing, actually being able to enjoy it rather than it being a lifeline or an anchor trying to feel like I fitted in somewhere, is only recently, and that probably aligns with my ability to receive positive feedback because I actually felt okay enough within myself to actually appreciate the sincerity of that. So in the last few years, really, and there are times where I don't necessarily entirely believe it. I think my confidence in my ability to do something is discrepant from my belief of whether it's good or not. That probably doesn't make sense.
No, it made absolutely no sense.
It doesn't make sense. And there's nothing necessarily sensible about it. But if we had to nail it down, it would be only recently.
It's so interesting because people have this perception of the singer-songwriter or the even just the singer as being someone, brimful of confidence, especially someone with such a powerful and emotive voice. But what you're outlining here is the exact opposite. So, absolute vulnerability, self-doubt.
It's desperate.
Yeah.
It's a desperate cry.
Yeah. And to those of us that sort of knew you through Cordrazine, we got that, but most people wouldn't get that. But it was a time of some turmoil for you. Life wasn't moving in straight lines.
No, and a lot of that was my own creation as well. If I'm entirely honest, I set up, I created the narrative that was able to, you could foresee me leaving the band at some point in time. And I would say I disguised that behind authenticity, saying that if I didn't like it, if it wasn't the thing for me, then I would walk away from it. And I created that. And I set that up for a while beforehand because that was my out clause.
Escape hatch.
But it was simple. Success was a spotlight on all of the aspects of myself that I felt uncomfortable with. But if I'm honest about that now, and the significance I probably attributed to all of the things that I thought about myself, I suspect that we all as humans doubt ourselves. We're all anxious. No one particularly loves every aspect of who they are, but I don't think that we're particularly good at sharing those vulnerabilities with others. And if I had have been able to have the insight that the things that I struggled with were probably a bit more universal than what I was aware, then maybe I would have continued.
But that's why people responded to what you were doing, because it was universal. It is universal.
And that was the challenge. I wasn't able to cope with that.
Yeah,
it was really simple. It was a case of you walk away or others take different paths. And I'm not saying that I got to that I was at that point where you kind of go, okay, my life is catastrophic. For me, I'd set up an out where I could just kind of go back to anonymity.
Which you did repeatedly.
I think we've had this conversation that I've never supported a record. I seem to make music and then run away from it.
Yeah.
And I must be eternally frustrating for the people that I work with and who support me and continue to show faith in me. And yet there I am running away after creating something.
Yeah, going to climb some mountain in, I don't know, out in Mongolia or wherever it was.
It's usually some life crisis. It's usually some life change.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that, but you've physically, geographically left the premises as well, and
I do.
Just left.
That seems to be my thing, but there's a reason for that, and I suppose it's about pursuing life rather than allowing yourself to get caught in the misery of struggle. So you can stay around in a place and battle with things not being the way that you want them to. Or you can geographically move yourself, and the streets are different, the people are different, the view is different, and there's not the pressure to come to terms with yourself at any haste. You've got time, and so it's time to kind of rebuild and reconstruct and find that self to then bring back. And I think there's something about being away from the people that know you and love you, who can hold you accountable for yourself. When you're anonymous in another part of the world, you can become and create your utopian self. You have the opportunity to edit your personal story, and there's no one there to challenge that. And so you can be the perfect self. The challenge then comes when you come back, being able to enact that. And I think as life has gone on, being able to then live sustainably that utopian self has become easier.
Well, things have obviously changed because
things change.
Because here we are, talking about your personal self. You're not hiding. You're under lights.
I'm under a light.
Yeah.
But just to make it very clear, I was also away when before Cordrazine first released their record. So when we recorded our first EP, I didn't think anyone was going to buy it. We kind of made it for $1,500. The show that we played before it was due to be released ended up costing us money because no one turned up. And so it didn't seem to be that much of a problem for me to go travelling. And this kind of, to make it sound old now, this was before kind of having mobile phones and internet and all of those kind of things. So I went travelling and I went off-grid, and it was only when I got back to Bangkok and I called home that I discovered that a whole lot of people were trying to find me because the record had started to do okay. So, yeah, I've just got a tendency of disappearing every now and then.
Well, not anymore.
No.
And you're playing songs, as we know, from your, I guess, catalogue of favourites. Which one would you like to do next? So, let me look uncomfortably for my plectrum, which I decided to sit on. I'm going to do Song to the Siren, which was a Tim Buckley song, which was then recorded by This Mortal Coil. Yes. And Liz Fraser was the singer in This Mortal Coil, and also the Cocteau Twins. And so she is a voice of 4AD, a label in the UK. It was really important to me, and I think there was something about that label, which was and the output of it, which was a lot of female singers. So Lisa Gerrard and the Cocteau Twins were the two that I really connected with, and it was their voices. Lyrics weren't really important. And I think for me, as a teenage boy who didn't necessarily have the language to describe emotions or to communicate emotions effectively, to have these sounds and these voices that captured emotions without the complexity of words was something that I became really attracted to and immersed in.
I think it's affected my singing so much that I still struggle to enunciate the words that I write in songs, simply because I started singing sounds, and it was more about the sound of the voice and the emotion of the voice rather than the lyrics. So I suppose it was, in that sense, it was something it was like a primal scream. But I think this is an absolutely beautiful song. Whether I can ever do it justice, I'm not sure. And it's got one of my favourite verses of any song, which is the last verse. And it's about a person questioning the value of life. And I think it's the way that it's written is just beautiful. On a floating shapeless ocean, I did all my best to smile until your singing eyes and fingers drew me loving into your arms. And then you said, swim to me, let me unfold you. All my heart shies from the sorrow. Did I dream you dreamed about me? Were you here when I was fallen? Now my foolish boat is leaning, broken heart on my own. And you said, swim to me, let me unfold you. All my heart shies from the sorrow. And I'm as puzzled as a newborn child. I'm as riddled as the tides. Should I stand amidst the breakers, or should I lie with death, my bride? And you said, touch me not, come back tomorrow. All my heart, all my heart shies from the sorrow.
Nice. How do you feel singing that?
Transported.
Yeah.
That's
Where to?
a very peaceful place, but it's a sad place. It transports me to, physically, geographically, a rock.
A real rock in the real world.
In the real world. If anyone knows the strip of beach between Sorrento Surf Beach and Portsea,
Okay.
there's a rock there. And it was a rock that I used to go and sit on and just watch the tides. And I recall the thoughts that I would have there, and I'd watch the horizon, and there was something about that I thought about the smallness of myself within that frame, and the insignificance of me, and I suppose it's quite sad. So a song like that was comforting within that space.
Why? Because it's such a big song. It's sort of like oceans wide and deep, right?
Because it's the last verse, which is I'm talking about being as puzzled as a newborn child and riddled as the tides, and should I stand amidst the breakers or lie with death my bride. That's existentialism. It's like that's Camus, and that's Beckett. It's a beautiful capture of the human experience and existence, and I don't find it a depressing question. I think it's an affirming question. I think all art asks us that question, which is what is the purpose of life? And to me, there is nothing more extraordinary than the power of nature to actually ask that question.
Well, it's a song sort of like, at one level anyway, very steeped in nature, the sort of sea spray and the ocean and the sort of mystery that the ocean can conjure up. It seems like it's very, very outside and natural.
It's a really calm place because it's a relation. I've developed a relationship with that piece of music for such a long time. I remember the first time I heard it, and the first time I heard it was on a cassette, and it was a recording of a Cocteau Twins Peel session, and I remember being struck by that and listening to it over and over and over, and the beauty of the voice and the fragility and the otherworldliness of Liz Fraser's voice, and I'd never heard anything like it. And I think my life's pursuit will be to try and sing that song as well as I can.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's you don't hear things like that now, but I think it's just so timeless. Like it could be sung by monks in the Middle Ages or something. It's got that. It just could be anywhere or anything. I think that's the beauty of it. But you wouldn't have, like most of us, you wouldn't have been able to discern what the lyrics were when you first heard it on that cassette.
No, and it was the voice. It was the emotion, and that was relatable to me. I don't think lyrics became important to me until the Smiths. Until I discovered the
Moz.
Smiths. Yeah.
Talk to me about the Smiths.
Probably the most important band. It's hard to say that because there's almost a sense where you can. It's easy to try and edit out parts of your musical history that kind of are uncool. The very first song that I ever learnt was a U2 song, and it was actually a U2 song that I remember vividly driving in the car with my mum and seeing fields, green fields that looked very green by Australian standards under a grey sky, and I heard Gloria. I think it was 1981 or 1982, U2's first single off October. And that was a song that really hit me, and I still don't know why, and I still love the song. And so U2, those early U2 records were very, very strong and very impactful But it was
Same.
the Smiths that, I suppose, Morrissey was the person that was able to capture that loneliness and that sense of alienation and all of those things that spoke to me being by myself in my bedroom.
Right, so we're back to that again. It's it's music as a companion.
And as a teenager, trying to understand yourself and your identity and the awkwardness that goes along with all of that. Last night I dreamt that somebody loved me, and I know it's over. They capture all of that. Like, it captures the awkwardness of thinking that you're unlovable and that once you found love that you're never going to find it again, and the best of your life is behind you. And that was the first time that lyrics became important. That was the first time I think that I actually identified with lyrics.
So on your first listenings of the Smiths, when it was hitting home, were you listening to Johnny Marr play incredible guitar as well, or were you just hearing Morrissey?
I was just hearing Morrissey. I was just hearing that voice. And it was motivating because there was a person that it felt like they were trying to sing well. I don't know if that makes sense.
He was, to you?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what
that's
it
cool.
felt like at the time,
Yeah.
because up until I heard the Smiths, it was all of these really idiosyncratic voices, you know, people that had this uniqueness. But there was this person who kind of warbled. Now I kind of go out of tune. If someone had have said to me that they were a bit pitchy at the time, I would have been horribly aghast at that. But I remember hearing it. There was a guy that I used to catch the bus home from school with, and he was a bit older, and he was always had records, and very kindly would always just lend me records, and that was when I first heard the Smiths. And
Okay.
it was I borrowed a record of a
Was it
guy in a...
Meter's Murder?
No, it was A Queen Is Dead.
Okay.
But that wasn't the record that really captured me. It was Strange Ways Here We Come that really grabbed me, and then I moved backwards.
Yeah.
So it wasn't... Strange Ways wasn't the first Smiths record I heard, but it was the one that really sucked me in. I know everyone kind of talks about The Queen Is Dead being the seminal Smiths album or the Smiths, but they weren't the ones that I related to the most. It was Strange Ways.
Okay.
And particularly Last Night I Dreamt That Somebody Loved Me.
Okay. You've got a Smiths song up your sleeve today, I believe.
I do have a Smiths song up my sleeve.
Which one were you thinking of?
It's a song called Asleep, and it's a song from... It depends on which side of the Atlantic that you're on, whether it's on Louder Than Bombs or The World Won't Listen, because it is on both.
Yep.
And again, it's probably... It's not the most cheery of songs, but I kind of find it really beautiful. Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. Sing to me, and then leave me alone. Don't try to wake me in the morning, 'cause I will be gone. Don't feel bad for me. I want you to know. Deep in the cell of my heart, I really want to go. Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I don't want to wake up on my own anymore. Sing to me, sing to me. I don't want to wake up on my own anymore. Don't feel bad for me. I want you to know. Deep in the cell of my heart, I really want to go. There is another world. No, there must be. No, there must be. No, there must be. No, there must be. Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I don't want to wake up on my own anymore.
Thanks, Hamish. It's beautiful. We started talking about singing your baby to sleep, and now we've just heard Asleep by the Smiths. Thanks, mate. Thanks for sharing so much with us today.
It's okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming for a chat.
Pleasure.